Hello, everyone. It's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro. I'm happy to be with you today. We've got another great show. How about them apples? We managed to do great shows over and over again. And we've got another great one in store for you: faith, farming, and food security. We're going to visit with David Stelzer today of Azure Standard. If you haven't heard of Azure Standard, you're in for a treat. They are an answer to so many of your prayers. But David is a very unique individual. He grew up in farming. His hobby is gardening, go figure. And he is the founder of Azure Standard. And he actually has 11 children. He's the dad to 11 children. Isn't that awesome? A lot of helping hands in the garden, I would hope.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to get to know David and his background a lot better, but we're going to explore some really important topics today. Food security, I think, is something that a lot of us care about, and we're trying to take control over the food that we eat and the products that we put in our body. I get my all natural whole food supplements from Azure Standards. I don't pay the network marketing company price. Instead, I pay the Azure Standard price, and I actually get whole food supplements, not synthetics. So I love them for that, and I love their system. They'll come to a community near you. You place your order. The next month, you go and pick it up. Everybody's so orderly. They all help unload the truck, and they all put things down. And it's just so organized. It's awesome to see a community get together like this. But Azure Standards all over the U.S., and you should check them out at azurestandard.com. But we're going to talk with David today. So, David, I'm going to put you on the spot right off the bat. I'm going to ask you a question. Your family has over a century of farming tradition in the Pacific Northwest. So, how did that heritage shape your personal journey into organic farming?
Well, I am actually second generation for organic farming. My dad actually made that decision in 1973. I was still a pretty young guy at that point in time, not really making the decisions yet. And so, so I did come into it through our heritage, from the previous generation. Um, you know,
But it was quite a switch for you guys, for your family farm, to switch to organic. You went cold turkey, no chemicals. Let's see what we can do with organic farming.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Dad did it out of conviction, not because he thought he could make more money at it or some other reason. In fact, there really wasn't even any market for it in 73 to
Right.
speak of. He did it because he thought it was the right thing to do for his family's health, for the health of the planet. And he always used to tell me, he said, always remember that the farmer is the guardian of the nation's health. And
Mm.
that's something that always stuck with me. So he would definitely, was a forerunner, a little bit ahead of his time when it came to, this whole, subject.
I like that notion of the farmer being the guardian to the nation's health. That's RFK Jr. would really appreciate hearing that, I'm sure.
Maybe
uh,
so.
Now you started selling grain from your family farm out of your pickup truck at just 21 years old, correct?
Well, actually a little younger than that. I started Azure Standard when I was 21 years old. I
Oh, wow. So what challenges did you face in those early days? What kept you motivated?
Well, when I started actually becoming the responsible party for the farm, I began to realize that a farmer was in kind of this strange situation. You go and you kind of hold both hands up and you say, "Well, how much do I have to pay for my tractor, fuel, property taxes, all the big expenses for the farm and small ones?" And the other hand, you hold up to the grain commodities board or whatever, and you say, "How much do you pay me for my grain, cattle, whatever it is you're raising?" The only thing the farmer then has control over is the quantity, which is a complete incentive for bad quality, because all you care about, all that you're economically incentivized for, is quantity. I did
Mm.
not want to be that farmer. I did not want to be the farmer that was going to say, I have to produce more and more crappy stuff because all I get paid for is quantity. So in my mind, I was out, well, somebody cares about what food they're eating. I don't know for sure who all the somebodies are, but I need to find those somebodies. And so, I started out going around to, co-ops and natural food stores and stuff like that, and saying, "Hey, do some will you buy some grain?" I remember I used to go to a lot of Magic Mill stores back in those days. There was
Oh, yeah.
a company called Magic Mill and
Yeah.
Boss. They were somehow connected, and I would sell grain to all these little Magic Mill stores. That was one of my bigger markets. I
Wow.
think they've kind of disappeared now for the most part.
Well, the Bosch stores are still all over. I still buy from Bosch stores for my
Okay.
Bosch, you know, ingredients. Um, okay, so Azure Standard has grown to serve over 3 million families across all 50 states. What
That
aspect of this growth?
that might be a little bit of a highball number.
Oh, well, that's what my research is showing. But you would know
Okay.
better. You're running the business. But what aspect of the growth has surprised you the most?
Well, surprise me, I guess, from what point? Moving forward, the biggest surprises that I had as far as growth spurts happened when there were some kind of a major economic downturn. And we saw that, I saw a big growth spurt in 2008 when we had that crisis. And then when COVID first started, we saw a huge growth spurt at the beginning of that when the economy was just trashed from the COVID
Mm,
lockdowns, not from COVID, from the lockdowns. Um, we saw a really large growth spurt that totally surprised me. Probably the biggest surprise I ever had as far as Azure growth was March 15th of 2020. Or maybe it was, anyway, right in there. The president went out and declared that we were going to have lockdowns. And truthfully, I didn't think anything of it. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, couldn't give a rip really. Um, out in the farm, and that was like on a Friday, and on a Sunday, I got a call from one of the people in the team. They said, "Have you looked at our web traffic?" And I had, "No, I haven't been. I'm out here doing my favorite hobby in the garden today." And it's a Sunday afternoon. Come on. Um, so I went and looked, and we had received more orders on that Saturday and that Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday than we had the previous 3 months
wow.
of. So that was probably my biggest surprise I ever had.
That is a doozy. Okay, so many of our listeners are concerned about food security. Share with us your thoughts on how vulnerable is our current food system, and what are the biggest threats to it?
Well, I mean, our food system is very fragmented, and it comes in from all over the world. It's a relatively complex logistical puzzle. And it wouldn't, we even saw major disruptions in food supply um, when even small things happen. For instance, there is a scare. Grocery store shelves will empty out in a big hurry before you can even imagine it, because everything is on a timer, basically. Everyone's um, just producing enough that they're producing just enough for what they sell.
And
So
then we have just in time delivery on top of that.
Oh, exactly. I mean, no grocery store or even food warehouse for the most part is going to, I mean, do more than a few weeks supply. In fact, in business, they teach us the faster your turns are, the more money you make, right?
Mhm.
So you're trying to increase turns. So, and then when we get global issues, for instance, you know, the issues that we had at the ports here a couple of years back, particularly, not that they're completely cleared up even to this day, but we had ships lined up at the ports, so there wasn't near as much ocean freight happening. We had massive shortages in some segments, um, the imported side of the equation, which unbelievably is a lot.
Well, let's talk about food independence. If you could suggest how families could become more food independent, what are three things that you could suggest that they could do?
Number one, grow a garden.
Hmm.
That's a very important part, even if it's in the flower bed at a suburban place. And that's just, hey, I think that's good on multiple levels. Number two, most important thing, have a pantry. And I'm not saying 10 years of supply in the basement or dug in a bunker. Just have a pantry that you have enough that you buy in bulk and buy the things, have the things that you normally eat, not things you don't eat.
Hmm.
Um, and just, have a, what you would use over the course of the next few months, even. Having a pantry is very, very important. And then I would say number three is really know how to prepare good, tasty food from the raw ingredients. And I think those are probably, you could get into all the edge cases, but those are probably the three focus points, I would say.
Well, I'm sure that your thoughts on food security have evolved over the years. Can you share with us some of that evolution?
Well, you know, my initially, food security was more like a thing where, hey, have enough food, in case some terrible thing happens that, you're okay. But now my thought is I guess that's still an aspect of it, but the biggest part of food security is about the quality of our food. If we have food that is the way without a bunch of chemicals and various things in it that destroy our health, our food, we can die of starvation and be obese at the same time. And that's the problem that we have with the food system in America right now. We have a system where we have overprocessed, over-refined, addictive foods that are being pawned off as even as healthy foods. That is that is the biggest threat to food security in my mind now. It's about the quality of the food being such that it brings health, nutritional fulfillment, and energy and thinking clearly and all those things to us. Because if we have our health, we can survive almost anything. If we don't, even if we have a whole basement full of food, we're in tough luck. And
Yeah.
I really feel like food security, that's the biggest threat that I see today. And that's kind of the evolution that I've seen in the last 25 years or so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we're very vulnerable to the chemicals and such in our food, and it has caused a health crisis. And so, food security needs to include quality food to truly be secure. And I love it when people ask me, where can I find, good quality food that'll stay on my shelf for a while. And I tell them, grow your own and then can it. That's
Okay.
that's your best bet. What are some of your favorite food preservation methods?
Well, I mean, canning is still top of the list in my book too, as far as preserving the food out of your own orchard and garden.
Yeah.
In fact, we were having I actually put a lot of work into that for our Azure customers to come up with we actually put our own line of canning jars out because I believe so strongly in it. And, pretty much Ball was the only one in the game, which is actually Rubbermaid. And, um, and their stuff was getting really poor quality. It was discouraging a lot of folks. And so we actually designed and built we don't make it. I don't have a glass factory, but it's our design and specifications for our own line of canning jars. So that's super important. Drying is nice, both freeze drying and traditional drying. I guess I'm a little bit more into traditional drying more than freeze drying at this point. But I still, we still dry a lot of our own herbs and spices and things like that, as well as a little bit of fruit for snacks. It's a great way to preserve food. And then, um, if you're in the right position, the freezing or freeze drying, the cool part about freeze drying is you can traditionally freeze the foods ahead of time and dry it slowly over time from frozen. And it actually even works better. So if you want to,
Interesting.
yeah, if you have extra peaches, throw them slice them up, throw them in the freezer, and then you can run out of freezer space. You can freeze dry them.
Interesting. That's interesting. Well, beyond growing food, there's a lot of people who want quality food preservation, but there's a lot of people who feel like they can't. They have limited space. How would urban or suburban dwellers with limited space participate in creating their own food security? What would you suggest?
If they don't have the space to grow food,
Yes.
yeah. So, I mean, you can always grow a little bit, even if it's in the house. And I highly recommend that. Microgreens are super easy to grow, guys.
Amen. They
Yeah,
are. They're so great.
and sprouting is a great way too for to get optimal nutrition from home. But it doesn't take a lot of space to store the staples, to have a pantry. You can have a pantry in very, very little space, and you can save money at the same time. You can build a little. I have a lot of customers. We sometimes have people send in pictures of some of their ways to store their pantry ideas. And one of the most fun ones is the gallon jars, the glass gallon jars. We sell the glass gallon. We call them milk jars, but they're like gallon jars that, like homesteaders put milk in a lot of times. But instead of milk, they're putting them in shelves. Like they build these little wooden shelves. They go out about 10 inches from the wall, along a whole wall in the inside of the house. And then they just line these jars up all in these shelves. It looks like a little rack, and some of them will have, okay, so here's the gallon jar rack, and here's the quart jar, and here's the pint jar rack. And it's really cute and very practical. You lose one space, 10 inches of wall space. It's super convenient. You don't even have to put doors on it unless you want to for some reason. And it's sealed tight in glass, one of the best preservation methods that you can for dry goods.
Yeah.
And, and that's not if you're doing wet canning, of course, have to keep those upright and everything. But these you can slide in there on their side or however, at an angle or however you do it. That's one cute way that's very practical and very safe.
Yeah.
Because but there's certainly others as well. Buckets, and that can even be under the counters, anywhere,
Under the bed, even.
even under the bed. Yeah, we have the buckets with gamma lids. the 2 gallon. You can put a gamma lid on it, which is basically goes on a bucket tight, but then the
Yeah.
whole middle screws out, and it
Yeah. It
makes
makes
a
it much
nice
easier to get into. Yeah.
makes it easy to get in and out. And they're sealed so the insects and moisture doesn't easily get in.
So let's say we've got a self-reliant person developing, their own food production. What essential skills should every self-reliant person develop regarding food production?
Food production. I mean, obviously, you're going to start in the garden or with a little few animals. So you're going to, from a gardening perspective, it's not super hard, and a garden is super, super forgiving in all fairness. But, you know, don't get too confused by all the different methodologies. Oh, you got to do tillage. No, you don't want to do any tillage. Use cardboard, use compost, use this or that. All those methods will work it to some degree, but none of them are bad. They all are fine. The main thing is you just want to have as as many nutrients as you can in your soil. So if you have super poor soil, and it's super easy to see, hey, how do things grow? How do the weeds grow? How does the grass grow? If it's rich soil, the weeds and the grass are going to be growing just fine too. If nothing grows, then you have a lot more. You got to put a lot more nutrients on. Um, Also, another little trick for making things grow. Um, I've always used when you don't know how to do soil testing and all those kinds of things that us that are into agriculture do. So we rely on a lot of things. We use sap analysis, we use soil tests, we use bricks meters, we use all these special gadgets and stuff to get optimum. But truthfully, you can do all that stuff fine just by looking at it, looking at your plants. And if your plant looks a little peaked, one of the easy ones is liquid fish. Just dilute up some liquid fish, just like off the label. Give every plant, depending on how big the plant is, but a pint, a quart, or even a gallon if it's a bigger plant of liquid fish. And if your soil is really poor, you can almost keep it going if you do that about every 2 weeks throughout the growing season. It's a really quick shortcut to be able to grow anything. Otherwise, watch your weeds, let your weeds come up before you and till them out at least once, till them out or cultivate them out in some way before you plant is helpful. Otherwise, you spend a lot more time, getting the weeds out. Um, Otherwise, hey, gardening is really not that difficult. You got to keep a little bit of nutrition on, and you got to give the plant light and space. And that's just about it when you come right down to it. And, there's all the complexities of gardening. You can read 100 books about gardening and all the different companion planting and seed rate. But really, I mean, those are all just little fun things. The basics are simple. I'm s- I'm sorry. I just went.
I said, what do you see beginners make in terms of mistakes when they try to get into their own food production?
Uh, Number one, they try to raise things they don't even know what are. They get into a seed catalog and start reading the descriptions, and they have all these things that they don't even know what to do with them. Oh, how's the kohlrabi doing? Now, I love kohlrabi, and maybe other people do too, but I've seen so many people ask, "What the heck do I do with this now?" It's like, okay. Um, That's another thing they'll try to do is I can't tell you how many people have asked me, well, I decided to plant some beans or some grain or something like that. They don't have a clue how to harvest it or to process it once they did harvest it. So that's definitely, don't grow something you don't actually know how to use. Don't grow something that you don't know how to harvest. Um, you know, I I could teach you how to harvest grain, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot cheaper to buy grain that somebody that has a combine than trying to thrash it like they did 1,000 years ago,
Yeah.
because the equipment has come a long ways in the last 500 years or so in that space. um,
So, what do you say to people who think that organic farming or organic foods is just a marketing gimmick to get more money?
um, that they don't know anything about it yet, and they need to be uh, they need to understand biology just a little bit. The basic principle, if I give it to you in just a 2-minute synopsis, there's two. If there are a ton, hundreds of farm chemicals, but if you just do two, the most common things, and one is the weed killer Roundup, the glyphosate issue. Glyphosate is a mineral inhibitor. It does not allow the plant to take up proper minerals. It makes the immune system of the plant no good, and it dies from fusarium wilt or some other disease. That's how Roundup works. The problem is when we get it in our bodies, it inhibits the uptake of minerals in our bodies as well. And it is 100% linked to chronic illnesses and, of various, a whole bunch, almost all the autoimmune disorders that we've seen this huge rise of. You almost never heard of autoimmune disorders, say 40 years ago or 50 years ago. And today, almost everybody has some. That, in my opinion, and there's a lot of science to back this up, is highly caused by the glyphosate. Number two, anhydrous ammonia or aqua ammonium nitrates. So they in a farm, in the soil, there's a symbiotic relationship between bacteria in the soil and the nutrient and the plant. The plant exudes sugars from its photosynthetic action into the soil to energize the microbes. The microbes break down the available nutrients that are in the soil, be that from mineral or plant matter, and make it bioavailable to the plant. And that's the way it's supposed to work in nature. And nitrogen is the growth regulator. And if all the nutrients in the plant are available, the nitrogen goes up and the plant grows bigger. If not enough nutrients because the bacterial count is too low, is too small, the nitrogen goes down and the plant is smaller. So it concentrates the few nutrients that it has into a smaller footprint or less volume in the plant. So farmers figured out around World War II time or a little before, that nitrogen could be synthesized. So you could create this anhydrous ammonia, and you could put it on the soil, and the plant would think that it has nitrogen when it really doesn't. So it grows a lot more volume. So back to what a farmer is paid by volume, the size of the plant. So it makes the plant grow a lot bigger. Well, the plant has no way to you can't synthesize the other nutrients in the soil. There are 72 nutrients that we need that are known right now that we need for optimum health. There's maybe more. But, science will tell us we need at least 72 nutrients for optimum health. when you're feeding the soil and creating this much larger plant, so a lot more carbohydrates because it just created, there's more leaves and stuff to create the sugars, but the microbes did not break down the nutrients in the soil because the growth regulator was synthesized. Then you have nutrient deficient food. So you're getting food that does not have the nutrients in it that the plant originally had it in it when God made it for us for food, or nature designed that food, that plant for food for us or other animals. And that's, though, if you just had those two things, and now there's a bunch more, and I could get into a bunch more, but just those two things in and of themselves, and those two are never going to get by. There's people that'll cheat on other areas in organics, maybe, and you maybe hear about stories, but no farmer's going to get away with either one of those two because they're super obvious and any inspector would catch it 100%. And it's more than 100% plus worth going to organic for just those two things.
Wow. So you talked about optimal health. Have you had experience with people um, who have been able to change their life because of going organic?
Oh, absolutely. I get to hear that story all the time. That's one of my favorites. And my own story is comes from that side. And it really started with my parents, but I was a super sickly child. Um, the doctors told my parents that I probably would not make it to even to adolescence, let alone adulthood, because I had all this stuff wrong. And my parents did not want to believe that. And so they made dietary changes. They changed the diet in our household, and I regained my health. My grandfather was also there. He had heart disease. Um, he couldn't hardly walk across the yard without having to pop heart medicine. And after changing the diet in our family, he completely recovered. And he was, about 10 years later, he was actually killed in a farming accident, working 18 hours a day again on the farm. Uh, he completely regained his health. And so that's why I'm so sold on it to begin with, because my story and our family story starts with dietary change, changing our health and changing the outlook. And that's what I love doing the most here at Azure, is being able to supply food to families. The same, I hate to, without their permission, to use other people's examples, but even in my family, I was a sickly kid. My wife was kind of uh, had a pretty rough childhood as well as far as health goes. But when we got married, we went to a purist diet.
Mm.
Um, you know, uh, we don't cheat at all on our diet. It's either out of the garden, or it's organic, or it's just the way, very clean. And so we raised our kids doing that. I don't think any of them even knew what candy tasted like. They'd never, I don't think most of our children have ever been to McDonald's to this day. Um, they've never don't even know what it is. It looks gross to them now. But, we experienced, both of us as kids were like at the doctor in and out all the time and stuff. But when we changed our diet, really neither one of us have been back since then. And we raised 11 kids, and none of them ever saw a medical doctor. They never even had a primary care physician because they never even saw a doctor.
Wow.
They never got ill enough to see a doctor, other than we did have one broken femur that we got a doctor to help set that. But
Wow.
other than that, there was never, an illness. So in my own life, in my own family, it works. And it works pretty much for everyone who does it carefully.
Mm.
Hey, do it once a week. Probably not going to it's not going to change your life. Do it steady, you know, do it 90 plus 95% of the time, and you're going to start seeing a major difference. Eating organic, and it's not just organic. I mean, don't eat a bunch of organic sugar either. Do it in balance. I mean, you can get organic sugar, you can get some organic junk food. It's not just about organic. It's about eating a balanced and healthy diet. Strong in the way, in I should say, really devoid of any processed foods, heavily industrialized processed foods. Just cut that out and make foods as close to the way as nature intended as you possibly can. And that's when you really start seeing results. And it works. It's not a fast thing. It's not going to happen in 3 days or 2 weeks. But over the course of a year, and especially over the course of a lifetime, it'll reap dividends like you never imagine.
Your work seems guided, if you will, by, deeper principles beyond just business success. How does your personal philosophy inform your approach to farming and food distribution?
Well, I mostly just shared that kind of. It's because I so strongly believe in healthy food from healthy soil creates healthy families. And I also believe very strongly that the health of a nation, including the mental health of, is completely guided by the health of the body. And so by being able to give families an option for healthy food at a price that a family can actually afford. It's not whole paycheck um, retail stores downtown that you can go to. You can get healthy food in bulk, fill your pantry, eat from home, and you can eat for less than you would eat the highly processed food for.
Yeah.
If you're willing to prepare those meals for your family. And I really see that as, my mission. I really believe in healthy food for families. I think, every child should have the opportunity not to grow up strong and healthy. The kids should be eating healthy food so they're not so lethargic that they want to sit and play video games.
Hmm.
The kids need to be out climbing trees and doing the things kids do. Helmet or no helmet, they need to be doing those things. And it's like, um, and that's what creates a healthy society. If the
Yeah.
children grow up healthy, they grow up healthy both physically and mentally. And they will think straight and they will make good decisions for their life. And we will not have, it's not, I really believe that you know, we talk about drug addiction and all this stuff. The gateway to that is unhealthy food practices.
Mm.
It's sugar addiction. It's food additives and excitotoxins and all that stuff. That's what's the gateway to drug abuse. It's, some people say, "Oh, well, it's societal." Yeah, sure, it's fine, but healthy kids that were raised with healthy bodies don't even want it. It's a big thing. The healthier the society is, the harder they work, the cleaner they eat, the less drug abuse, the less suicide, the less issues that we have with our young people. And the
Hmm.
youth is really what's going to dictate the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah. When we were discussing, I was discussing with your team before we did the podcast, what type of discussion topics. One of your discussion topics was faith over fear. And I'm curious how that mindset applies to perhaps becoming more self-reliant.
That's a really good point, and one of the my favorite things to talk about. In many ways, when we are sold a bill of goods, whether it was, hey, this COVID thing was a super example of that. They rolled out the fear big time. Oh, this is terrible, terrible, terrible. And you better stay at home. You better not go outside. You better mask. You better do this. You better do that. You better not do anything that is healthy because you better be afraid of this. You better get, you know, I don't know how many booster vaccinations and this and that because you ought to be afraid of this thing. You know, and it's not, I mean, that's just such a dramatic example because it just happened, in the last few years and almost everyone remembers it. But media and and marketing has relied on fear to push us towards to motivate people to do something, i.e., buy this thing. Oh, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be very pretty, so I'm going to buy this makeup, or this clothes, or I'm afraid that people won't, you know, I won't fit in society unless I have this kind of car, or the fear that side, or the fear that, hey, we better medicate ourselves with these drugs and this and that. Uh, if we don't, so that, and then that happens in marketing and in society through the major corporations, and the government does the same thing. It's fear. Oh, let us take care of you. I mean, you can't take care of yourself. By God, we need the FDA to regulate food safety. You couldn't possibly have some raw milk or something super dangerous like that. The
Yeah.
FDA has to make sure that that's not going to come into, your state. It's uh we got to, so people, oh yeah, we got to make sure that and same thing with, probably almost every agency out there that the government has created, is the way they sell it to get it to start is through fear. Oh, we're afraid that the houses aren't going to be built strong enough and they're going to blow down in a hurricane. So we're going to create the Department of Housing and Urban Development and building codes and this and that. You know, people built some amazing houses. If you ever go to Europe and look at 500 and plus year old houses, they're still standing just fine before any of that crap ever happened. And so people left to their own ingenuity can do a wonderful job at this kind of stuff. But fear brings in these regulatory things. It brings in we're all basically controlled through fear, and we've sold things that actually have decreased the quality of our life. And we get sold that about our raising our families too. You look at that, everybody is so afraid that we're going to do something to damage our kids. Oh, well, and they even pass laws. Well, got to have car seats and tell the kids 70 pounds or some crazy thing. You got to be sure that, if they ride a bike, they need to make sure they have a bike helmet on and knee pads and elbow pads and all this stuff. Man, that is not what's important. The important piece is to allow that child to experience life the way it really is and ride that, bike, maybe without a helmet, down the long hill 30 miles an hour. And if they crash and skin their arm up, it will get well. But if they're sitting inside just, because they're so afraid that they're going to get hurt climbing the tallest tree, or riding their bike or their motorbike, or, even going for a long hike, what if you get lost? All these fear factors. So they sit inside and watch TV. Then you have damage. So the fear of the external creates the internal damage that is so much greater than any external damage that could have possibly happened. Even if the worst case scenario, you know, happened. It's just sometimes. So when you mentioned, if I talk about this, this is kind of what I'm trying to say is that our motivation needs to be not fear. We need to be thinking about that every time that we do something. Are we doing this because we're afraid of the alternative? Are we doing this because we know it's the right thing to do? And there is a big difference. If we really dig deep into the motivation of what we do on a daily basis, am I doing this? Am I eating right because I want to live a healthy life? Or am I eating right because I'm afraid of cancer? And, it may end up basically the same result being the case, but it's not the same result because of the way we look at it.
Hmm.
If we look for a healthy and vibrant life, we're not going to get cancer. But if we're eating that way because we're afraid of cancer, and I'm just using that as an example, it could be anything. Um, because we're afraid of it, it's a motivation that's going to give us, yeah, we're going to be eating the same thing possibly, but we're not going to get near the bang for our buck, so to speak, as if our motivation is healthy living. So I
Yeah.
always want to encourage people, you talk about preparedness a lot. Is our motivation because we want to live a better life, because we want to be able to eat healthier foods, because we want to be skilled in life skills, or is our motivation is we're afraid that one day the system, so to speak, that we have in place is going to come crashing down on everyone's heads, and we want to be out in the country and we want to be somewhere where life is going to be a little simpler if something like that happens? Or do we want to be out in the country and doing that because we want to raise our families in a healthy lifestyle? The same result could happen, but it's a completely different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note for us to end on. I'd like to share with the audience of how they can experience Azure Standard themselves. And I'll put a link in the description as well. But why don't you share with everyone how they can find out more about Azure Standard and what Azure Standard has to offer?
All right. Well, Azure Standard is a premier distributor of organic and healthy food ingredients and gardening supplies and everything that you would need to live a healthy lifestyle. Um, and we created a little bit different logistics model where instead of like shipping products directly, like in the mail or UPS or something, we have trucks that go all over the country and we deliver into local communities. So instead of so you can it's a much more efficient model because we're able to take off large quantities, loads of stuff at local communities throughout the country as the trucks go across the country. And so we call those spots drop points. And then you can just place an order and you choose the closest drop point. To find a drop point near you in the footer of the azurestandard.com website, there's a little link that says find a drop, and it'll just pull up a little map, and you can either zoom in and find your location on the map, or you can actually type your zip code in there and it'll do the search for you as well. But then then you can place an order and then you can pick it up at that location. That's usually we have about a little over 4,000 of those drops around the country. Can't say it's going to be super close to everyone, but usually it's you know, within 15, 20-minute drive of the majority of people, unless you really live way out in the boonies.
Yeah. Well, I've had positive experience. I had my Einkorn wheat come in and I was so happy about it. And I was so happy to find farro as well. I had to order my farro because it used to be more abundantly available in the wholesale warehouses and it's just not. And I love farro, especially I love cooking it in my pot roast. It just
Oh, nice.
tastes so good. Farro and sweet potatoes in my pot roast, it's divine. So I'm glad that you
Well,
guys
good.
carry that. Well, thank you
Well,
so much for your time today, David. I know that you're so busy, and I'm grateful that of your business philosophy, and I'm grateful for your philosophy to help mankind. And I'm thankful for the time that you were able to spend with us today. Thank you so much.
well, thank you, Kellyanne. I appreciate you doing that, getting out there and teaching people about food preparedness. It is important. Thank you.